Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Helinsky. Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. Got another great guest today, Chris Perna, former football player for the Lumberjacks, also an assistant coach on the lower level with the Jacks. Chris, good to see you. Hope all is well with you. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Everything's great, Ed. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
You came to me and texted me and sent me a message that you wanted to talk about the rivalry between Payne Junior High, or Lowry, whatever you want to call, and Reszel. Ironically, both schools don't go by either name, and one doesn't exist, and the other one became North Tonawanda Middle School. So I'm going to let you go with this right now, and I think it's a fascinating subject because with the youngsters and at the young age, you know, how a rivalry started even at that young time in their lives. So go ahead, my friend.
Yeah. It was great for me. And I'm going to start off by saying that, you know, my parents weren't originally from North Tonawanda. I didn't know of the history of North Tonawanda football. I started off playing Little League football for NTAA, and I played 4 seasons for them. And I went to Catholic school. So come time for me when I was going into 7th grade, I asked my mother, I go, would you allow me to go to Reszel because I want to continue playing football? And at that point, I switched from St. Joe's School on Payne Avenue and went to Reszel in 1987 to try out for the football team there. So funny story, the summer before I started 7th grade, I grew up in the Gratwick area on Linwood Avenue, and I used to hang out at Johnny's Bike Shop, where a lot of kids my age hung out throughout the summer. And one day I saw Mr. Burke walking into the bike shop, and I knew that he was the coach for Reszel football. So him not knowing me, I followed him in, and he was doing some business with a bicycle of his. And while he was waiting, I walk up to him and I go, excuse me, Mr. Burke. I go, you don't know me, but I'm going to come and play football for you this year at Reszel, and I play center. And he looked at me, and I was probably 130 pounds. I'm not much taller than I was then, probably about 5'5". And he said, oh, great. He goes, look forward to seeing you come football season. And then I showed up at practice, and next thing you know, I beat out 2 9th graders to start as the starting center for Reszel Junior High that year.
Did Mr. Burke, did Fran Burke recognize you from the conversation that you had at Johnny's Bike Shop?
That I don't remember, if he remembered me or not. You know, I'm going to mention a drill that we did at practice, and Mr. Burke had these wooden boards out on the field, and you would line up across from each other, and the boards were there to keep your feet apart so you could drive into the person that you were going up against. And that's when Mr. Burke realized who I was, because I wasn't the biggest guy, I wasn't the strongest guy, but I might have been the hardest hitting guy on the team.
What type of influence did Fran Burke have on you and your growing years in football, and that maybe things that you took later on when you became a varsity player?
Mr. Burke was a huge influence on me. I didn't look up to a lot of people, but Mr. Burke was one of those individuals that I did look up to, being not only my coach and my gym teacher, but being a Vietnam veteran. I admired all those things. And so I played for Mr. Burke for 2 years at Reszel, 87 and 88. And then I was part of, now maybe you could let me know or not, but the first freshman team for North Tonawanda. I don't know if they had one years back before Reszel and Payne. That's something I don't know. Or was I on the first ever freshman football team in North Tonawanda?
Back then, during my time, they did have freshman football because at that point, Payne and Reszel went 7th, 8th, 9th. So come 9th grade, you could play freshman football. And of course, everything got changed and with the shift in population or whatever else. The reason why they kept 9th grade at these junior high schools is because there was classes of 650, 700, and 750 simultaneously at the high school, meaning sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And some of us were tripling up in our lockers.
Oh, wow.
That was virtually a brand new high school at that point, but there was such an explosion of kids attending at that point. But it did, and then it changed back when they became really a middle school at that point, and then you had the freshman football. But point well taken. I want to get back to what you recognized for rivalry between Payne and Reszel at that point.
Well, it was huge because you had two junior highs in one town. Most of the kids on one side of the town went to Payne, and the kids on the other side of town went to Reszel. And ironically, I lived on Linwood, and the street right next to mine was Woodward. And everyone on Linwood went to Reszel, and everybody on Woodward went to Payne Junior High. And I grew up with these kids, and we hung out during our childhood, and then come junior high, they went one way and I went the other, and I feel I was lucky enough to go to Reszel. And that is an ongoing joke amongst guys that I hang out with that, oh, you're a Reszel guy and you're a Payne guy. And so it was fun to have that rivalry between two schools, and knowing that you're going to be playing against them in a football game at Vetter Stadium, which was huge for me to play there. It was.
How were the football games? How was the competition back then when those two schools got together?
You know, I think the competition got better. You know, you're playing against a good team. You know, you're playing against guys that you knew, and of course you want to beat them. And lucky enough for me, my freshman career, we never lost a game in 3 years. And, you know, when we played Payne in '87, the first year, I played center. And of course, the first play, probably the first time all season, we had a missed snap. We fumbled the ball. Payne recovered, and they got the ball probably on the 20-yard line, and they ended up scoring on us the first time all year. It was the first team that scored on us, and that was the Payne-Reszel game. But we recovered and turned around and kind of blew them out. But it was still a fun game.
Do you think that in 7th and 8th grade and then freshman football, that you got a lot more coaching and the coaches were a lot more patient with you players, just so you would learn the fundamentals of the game and how to play as a team?
I believe they did. You know, like we mentioned earlier, Doug DeLuca, that was his first year coaching at North Tonawanda. And Mr. Burke had been coaching for years at North Tonawanda. And they seemed to be not the typical match of coaches. Mr. Burke seemed like he was an old school type coach, fundamentals, and then they bring in Doug DeLuca, who was throwing the ball all over the field and had all these gadget plays and things like that. And we were doing that at the freshman level. I was just looking up some old newspaper clippings, and our quarterback my first year was Ed Mahoney, and he was throwing for over 200 yards in some of these games at the freshman level. And that's, I think it's unheard of.
after your freshman year, you moved on, or better yet, after the younger years, you moved on to JV, and you had Andy Adcock as your coach there. Talk about the late Andy Adcock.
Coached?
Yes.
You know, it really saddened me when the news came out that Mr. Adcock passed away not that long ago. And of course, all the memories come rushing back of the season that we had that year. And, you know, our season started off a little rough at North Tonawanda that year. We had a few incidents at the high school that transpired, and one was a stabbing the first week of school. And I happened to be instrumental in that, in stopping the stabbing. So that kind of hurt us, I think, the first week of practice. Mr. Adcock and his brother were very supportive of me and rallied around me and supported me in what transpired, because it was very traumatic. And unfortunately, we lost our first game. But, you know, we came back as a team. We rallied around each other, and ended up going, we lost, like I said, we lost our first game, and then we won 7 in a row. So it was another great season. And, you know, back then, playing JV, Mr. Adcock had his own offense that he ran and a different defense than we ran in freshman and the varsity was running. Now, all 3 levels are doing the same offense and defense. But back then, Mr. Adcock ran a wishbone offense, and the defense was a 4-3, which I played inside linebacker. So we only had 2 outside linebackers, and I was the only inside linebacker. So that put a lot of pressure on me to cover everything in the middle and reading the play and making the right calls.
Terrific. Then after your freshman year, our JV year, then you went up to the varsity, and Dave Anastasi was your coach. I'm not quite sure who the assistants were at that point, but talk about Coach Anastasi and some of the coaches back then.
Yep, Mr. Anastasi was the head coach. I was reunited with Mr. Burke again, which made me very happy because we had such a great relationship, the two of us. And it was Doug DeLuca running the offense, Dave Vona running the defense with Ron Hopkins, who we also lost recently, which I had a great relationship with him as well. And Les Sheasley, who I was close with over the years. And the great thing about all these coaches, and maybe I was just lucky, but I continued to be friends with them after my football career was done. Mr. Vona and I stayed in close contact with each other because he was my defensive coordinator, and we liked each other a lot. And even when I joined the service, Mr. Vona on a regular basis would be sending me care packages overseas. And I couldn't ask for any better coaches than what I had. These guys were great.
So you played, in essence, 6 years, and you lost 7 games during your career, going from modified JV to varsity. That's kind of like unheard of. You realize that?
Yeah, I was, I think about it too, and it's crazy to think of that I went undefeated for 3 years, and if we wouldn't have lost that one game, our first game of the JV season, it would have been even a longer streak that I had going with the teammates that I had and the coaches I had. I think it was just, we gelled as a team. We came together. We had a goal that we wanted to accomplish, and we all worked hard.
I know you have younger kids at home. What type of things did you get from those coaches that you can pass on to your children?
Be the best person you could be. Set a good example, lead by example, and leave it all out on the field at the end of the day. These are still traits that I have today, and I use every day at work, and I carried these on into my military time when I joined the Marine Corps, and it was a great experience growing up in North Tonawanda and being part of the football family, I would like to call it. You know, like I said, my parents weren't from North Tonawanda, and it took me a while to catch on to what North Tonawanda had to offer. But I was so lucky along the way to meet like icons of the football history in North Tonawanda. And one of the individuals was Nick Sebek. Not only was he a player at North Tonawanda, he coached at North Tonawanda. He had a great collegiate career, played in the Army. He played for the Redskins. And I went to elementary school with his nephew, and Nick lived in the same home that he did. And I became close with Nick and actually called him Uncle Nick.
Nick lived with his family over on East Elton.
Correct.
Right. I mean,
so I was lucky enough to call him Uncle Nick along the way.
You weren't the only one that called him Uncle Nick. Some of us were very fortunate that had Nick Sebek as their phys ed teacher back at the old Gratwick School. I'll raise my hand.
Oh.
Yep, that was me. And Nick and I share the same bond because we're both Indiana University grads.
Oh, wonderful.
Which, and Nick, I lived across in the dorms where the old stadium was where Nick played. So, I mean, it was always a bond there with Nick Sebek till the day he passed away. Very fond of Mr. Sebek.
Yep.
One last.
And I was lucky enough. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I got out of the service in 2007, and that's when Nick Sebek passed away, and I was lucky enough to attend his wake and be there before it was over. So,
one last question for you: if you met somebody off the street, or maybe a business associate, and you got talking about high school football, what would you tell them about North Tonawanda football?
I guess I would tell them that I wished that everybody could experience what I did. The chance that I was given to play for North Tonawanda. And, I think I earned that chance to play for North Tonawanda. I showed up day one and worked hard and showed that I wanted to be a North Tonawanda football player. And it carried on from my freshman level to JV and to the varsity level. My one regret, I guess, would be that I never played at Rich Stadium. And that was a goal of mine. And my senior year, or my junior and senior year, we made it to the playoffs and unfortunately lost both times before we to go to Rich Stadium. And, that's still one thing that eats at me a little bit.
One last question. I'm going to pass the ball over to you. What would you like to talk about that I haven't asked you?
I'd just like to reiterate the bond that I had with my coaches, Mr. Burke, Andy Adcock, Dave Anastasi, Dave Vona, Les Sheasley, and Ron Hopkins. They were the best. They treated me with respect, and it was mutual. I worked hard for them, and they worked hard for me, doing the best job that they could.
Chris Perna, this has been a pleasure. Good to see you again. I hope you and the family stay well, stay healthy. We'll catch up with one another. once again, thank you so much for joining me here on the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. God bless, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Ed. This was wonderful.